So hello and welcome to another Paro seminar. As always, if you're watching live, you can ask questions, make comments in the chat box. If you're asking a question, maybe stick a Q in the front of it, capital Q, so that when I'm looking I can find it easily. There's a limit, 180 characters, so if you can't say everything you want to say, just do it in 2 or 3. I haven't done a Paro seminar for a while because we had Wake, we had Atheism for Lent, so we had like a 2 or 3 months there, so back to it. And what I want to do tonight, I talked a little bit about this on my Patreon a few weeks ago, but I'm going to do this in a public way, is I'm going to try to articulate as clearly as possible what this work is that I'm involved in and that many of you are co-creators with me on. And I'm always trying to do that. I'm always trying to articulate as clearly as possible what I'm doing. And I always feel like I fail, and so I have to try again. And it's the failure that generates the knowledge, and it generates something. And that's very key to this talk, to be honest. If you remember that metaphor, that will make, not even a metaphor, that example, that will make everything clear, which is through my failure to describe what Church of the Contradiction is, what a radical liturgy is, what a death-drive denomination is, through the continual failures to do it, something begins to arise. And actually a strategy that I have used for many years is to talk about this a lot, but to not really say concretely what it looks like, because the hope is that people will listen to what I'm saying, misinterpret me as actually saying something, and then create it themselves. So some of you will be part of this reformation, and I believe it's a reformation, or could be a reformation. And again, I want to give reasons why I think what we're talking about is a significant development within religion that is also in continuity and fidelity to that which it breaks from. So that's kind of key for what a reformation is. A reformation is a break from the past that retroactively reinterprets the past and therefore feels like it's woven into the past. So it's weirdly a break that weaves itself in. So once the Reformation has happened, it's like a completely different way of thinking, and at first it's really hard to get your head around that way of thinking. And then once you do, it retroactively makes all of this past discourse make sense in a new and radical way. Okay, so what is parotheology? What is Church of the Contradiction? What is this we're trying to create? It is also a practice, right? I've talked about this genealogy before, but I'm going to mention it very briefly, where I talk about how this notion of the death of God is articulated by the Apostle Paul, and he sees it as a salvatory, emancipatory event. And then with Luther, it becomes theological. And with Hegel, it becomes philosophical. And then with Nietzsche, it becomes existential. And then with Freud and Lacan, it becomes a technology. And that's the genealogy of the death of God for me. And then where does parotheology fit into that? It's the creation of a liturgy. So in a way, a space, we call transformance art, a space where you enter into it, and through the art, through this immersive experience, the spoken word, the music, the ritual, a certain form of an introjection happens. You take in the message of the liturgy, and it transforms your way of being in the world. So when you leave the liturgy, now you'd be going back to it maybe once a week for a few years maybe, but that gradually transforms your way of being in the world. And so I'm going to describe what I think that looks like. And maybe the place to start with that is, I did mention the cartels there. I do want to come back to that, which is on Patreon, we have about 15 people who are literally creating what these liturgies can look like. And what we're doing at the moment is we're doing it. Oh, Roger has just given me 99 cents. That's the first person who's ever given me money on YouTube. So that, I'm going to have to frame that, Roger. I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't even know people could give me money on YouTube. That's hilarious. Super chat. Well done, sir. Now you're going to start a tidal wave. Sorry, where was I? Oh yes, the cartels. What we're creating is fictional liturgies. So fictional, we're not even making them, we're just making them in our minds. But they might actually become actual. And we said we've created 3 so far. And I'm going to be showing those to people in the next couple of months. We're going to be doing a little bit more work on them. We're going to put them out, let people critique them, let people see what they look like, and then potentially put parts of them or even all of them into action. And I'm also looking at doing some of these liturgies in Belfast as well, and maybe in LA. I'm going to be in LA in August. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to start abstractly. I'm going to say some abstract theory, and then I'm going to give a concrete example to kind of ground the theory, a parable. I'm going to kind of parabolize the theory, which is what I like to do, and then I'm going to give an example. So we're going to start off, obviously, kind of abstract theory, which many of you love, and I love, so we're going to start there, and then, as I say, I'm going to kind of tell a story that I think captures what I'm trying to say, and then give an example, so that hopefully we're not just in theory, but also we can kind of like put some flesh on the bones of these ideas. But theoretically speaking, I want to start with something we've looked at before, which is what's called the Hysterics discourse in the work of Lacan. If you're watching this or listening to it, you might want to pull up the Hysterics discourse on your computer. So just type in the Hysterics discourse, Lacan, it'll come up. I want to briefly outline what that is, what that looks like. I want to say that this is a way of understanding what Church of the Contradiction is. And then, as I say, we'll start putting some flesh on it. I guess the analogy might be, this is the bones, is the Hysterics discourse. We will then put in the organs and then the flesh. All right. Okay, so the Hysterics discourse, there's 4 quadrants. And in the 4 quadrants, there is, in the top left-hand side, there is a barred S, barred subject. In the top right, there is S1. In the bottom left, there is A. And in the bottom right, there is S2. Right? So these are the 4 quadrants, and these are the 4 symbols. And I'm just going to go over what the 4 quadrants are, and then what the 4 symbols mean, and we'll take it from there. So the 4 quadrants are basically, the top left is the agent. So think about the agent as who is, so this is a discourse, so it's a social bond, it's a way of communication. And in the figure of the agent is who is communicating. So that's the top left. The top right is who is being communicated to. The bottom right is what is produced by that communication. And in the bottom left is the hidden truth out of which the agent speaks. Kind of what grounds the speech of the agent. So you've got the agent, then you've got the one who is being addressed, you've got what is produced, and you've got the truth that finds what the agent says. Okay, so what I would like to do if I had more time is there's 4 discourses. There's a couple more that Lacan talks about, but there's 4 main discourses: the Masters, the University, the Analysts, and the Hysterics. Now, if I had time, I would argue that the Masters discourse you can see in the creation story, the University discourse you can see in the covenants of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Analyst discourse you can see in the life of Jesus, and the Hysterics discourse is what you see in the figure of Christ. Right? So that's kind of how I look at it when I apply this to theology. Maybe I'll say a few words about Jesus and the analyst discourse. So the analyst discourse, in a nutshell, is a type of discourse in which, well, I guess to understand it, maybe I have to contrast it with the first two. So if you think of the master's discourse as you're being addressed by someone, a parental figure or a boss, who is telling you what to do. And the first example of this is what's called the no of the father. So the infant is kind of fused with the mother in some way. There's a real union between the mother and the child. And there is something that breaks that union, and that's called the name of the father. But that first name is a no, right? It's a no, you can't. Basically, no, you can't stay with your mum, right? You have to go into the world. It's also called the incest taboo in anthropology. It's kind of like, you can't just stay in private enjoyment, just in your mother's breast. You can't do that. You have to go into the world. You have to get substitute enjoyment. So there's a no. No, you can't. You cannot. And technically then, psychoanalytically, the first word in language begins not by saying something, but by saying no. A type of prohibition is put in place. The first word is no. And you think of the creation story, you shall not, right? You can think of that as the start of language. You shall not eat of the tree of the fruit of good and evil, right? So there's a no. And so that is the master's discourse. S1 is the agent, the master, who says no to the child. The child then has to interpret what that means, right? So they then go, what does my father mean by no? Do they really mean no? And if you think of the creation story, as soon as the no comes in, there's a, did God really mean, right? So the prohibition generates interpretation, generates an attempt to try to understand the prohibition, to try to interpret it, right? So it creates S2. S2 represents knowledge. So S1 is the master signifier, the master. S2 is knowledge, as you try to interpret the no. And this generates desire. So in the creation story, then they really want that fruit, which they didn't want before the prohibition. The tree was there and they didn't go for it. But as soon as the prohibition was in place, then the desire is created. A is a symbol for your desire, right? This desire is created through the prohibition, the interpretation. And beneath the master's discourse is always a divided subject. So whether it's your boss or your parent, they may seem like they're undivided and they know the answer, but secretly they're not. Secretly they're divided just like everybody else, right? That's the master's discourse. It's a master who tells you what to do. The university discourse, in a nutshell, I'm just going to say it very quickly, is that's a kind of where you're addressed by a teacher, by a lecturer, by someone who's giving you rules for life, by someone who is telling you how you should, wisdom, how you should engage in the world, act with your neighbor, do politics, whatever it is, right? The teacher who teaches the student. And interestingly, what Lacan does in this university discourse is he says that the teacher, it always has an ideology at work, right? There's always an ideology. Whenever someone tells you whether you should be single or married or polyamorous or monogamous, or whether you should be gay or straight or anything, right? There's always an ideology. No matter how much the person pretends that they're just an objective individual seeing the objective truth, you're always bringing something of your history and the history of the society into what you say. And what's interesting about that is Lacan is basically saying we do not want therapists who are like masters telling you what to do, because if anything else, that just generates the desire not to do it, right? Just if you have a master of a therapist and they're telling you what to do, it causes all sorts of problems. But neither should you have a therapist who gives you wisdom and advice about how to live your life, like what a counselor is, right? Providing counsel. Because that's always coming from a certain position. Even if it sounds like a good position, it's still a position. So in light of that, Lacan has what's called the analyst discourse. And it's a discourse in which the analyst takes up the position of A, your desire. So the analyst is kind of like not speaking, but is this kind of blank slate, upon which you can project your desires, the way you desire, onto the analyst, so that your desire begins to be analyzed. So the analyst is not there to give you anything, but rather as a way for you to confront your desire. And the reason why I connect that with the life of Jesus is just because you see in how Jesus is presented in the Gospels, seems to be very good at telling parables, and that can't be easily interpreted, but that bring up the hidden desires of the ones who are listening. Basically, you begin to confront yourself through this encounter with the other. He seemed like a master at showing us our own heart, our own disavowed desires, in a way that is transformative. Because as you encounter your repressed desires, they can be less powerful. They can have less of a hold on you. And you see this in the figure of Jesus. By the way, underneath, if you look at the analyst discourse, underneath A, in the agent, what's there is S2, which means knowledge. So every time you see S2, that means knowledge, roughly. And you could say that people like Jesus, and Socrates is a great example of this. Whenever people talk to Socrates, Socrates asked questions in a way that got people to see their own presuppositions, their own presumptions, the own illogical dimension of their thinking, right? So Socrates was a master at showing you your own contradictions. And it worked because it was sustained by this belief that he knew, S2, that he had this knowledge. So he didn't even have to show it. It's just that you believe that he's sustained by this knowledge that allows for that. So again, the analyst, you go and because you believe the analyst has some secret knowledge into your life, it allows you to project it onto him. An example that I've used before, but was one time I told Elliot, my podcast partner and dear friend Elliot Morgan, I told him about a dream I had, and I didn't really understand what it meant. I told him the dream. He went to the bathroom. He came back with a smile on his face, and I laughed and said, "Oh, I know what you think that dream meant." And then I gave an interpretation, and he was just smiling about something else. He was just laughing about something he was thinking about, right? But I assumed a knowledge that he didn't have that weirdly gave me access to an interpretation that was there, but I couldn't otherwise present. So, give you all that background. Don't worry if you're not following me yet, because it's all going to become crystal clear, I promise, if you just stick to the end, right? Because we get to the Hysterics discourse. The Hysterics discourse, a divided subject is the agent. What is a divided subject? That's an hysteric, someone who is in conflict with themselves, right? And I'm applying this to the liturgy because I would say Christ is a divided subject. Christ is the ultimate hysteric. Christ crucified. When he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And he experiences this radical alienation, theologically speaking, from himself, from his own essence, right? So he's a fundamentally divided subject. So if you think of Christ as a way of reflecting a fundamental alienation at the heart of everything. You can think of the Holy Spirit as the bar itself, right, as the divide itself. And you can think of God as the A that is underneath that sustains that division, that is sustained by, that is also sustained by that division. So object A, and we've talked about this before, so remember this object cause of desire, this unspeakable mystery, this unsayable, unsymbolizable real. That's what the A stands for. So let's call that God. God is the signifier of something that cannot be symbolized, of an unsymbolizable real, right? So there's God in the bottom left-hand corner as object A, right? Christ is in the top corner as a divided subject. Then we have on the right-hand side the congregation. The congregation, you come into this radical liturgy, and you're confronted through the art through the music, through the spoken word, without complexity and ambiguity, and parables and multiple interpretations. That's what you get in this immersive experience. Right? Now, why is the congregation S1? S1 is knowledge. So we're saying basically the congregation, us, we, often without knowing it, we have a whole view of the world and how it works. And often we go to a church, for example, because we already think we have the answers and we just want them echoed in the structure. You kind of go to where you already agree. You already agree with this church or whatever, and you go to get solidified in your position. But we all have this S1. We have ideology, ways of looking at the world. And we go into this space and we encounter the absolute as being unknowing, more unknowing in us. And what that generates is S2. That generates knowledge. And how I interpret that is it breaks us open to new possibilities, new interpretations, new ideas that we generate, that's not given from the front. Because think about it, the master tells you what to do, and the teacher also tells you what to do. The master just tells you, the teacher tries to reason with you and give you wisdom. In both of those, it comes from the outside. In this, knowledge is generated by you, not by the leader, right? It's generated through an encounter with this dividedness. And I think of it in terms of what happens in this liturgy is that you start to enjoy not having the answer, not having the product, not having the thing that will fix everything and fix your lack, but you start to enjoy the process of creation itself. So S2 can be thought of as creation and recreation, interpretation and reinterpretation. It's where you start to enjoy the process of life rather than attempting to have some sort of right answer. It's almost like you start to enjoy the question of life. And you still are interpreting and creating knowledge, but you're fundamentally never land on the right answer. And this is very similar to what Paul Tillich is thinking. So we've looked at ultimate concern, where Paul Tillich says faith is ultimate concern for truth, for beauty, for justice, right? Those are the three main ones. The philosopher seeks truth, the artist beauty, the activist justice. But what Tillich says is we never get truth, beauty, or justice. They inspire us. They are kind of what ground us. But if we ever think that we get truth, beauty, and justice, we become the opposite. That we get untruth, we get ugliness, and we get injustice. As soon as you think you have the answer and everybody who disagrees with you is immoral and ignorant, then it becomes idolatrous. So what Paul Tillich says is the person of faith is the one who is constantly open to pursuing truth, beauty, justice, but never landing there, because object A, the absolute, is utterly unspeakable. It is a mystery that's ontological, that cannot be penetrated, a real that cannot be spoken. So you start to enjoy this process of creation itself, which is fundamentally a new way of being in the world, because our way of being in the world, pre this conversion, is seeking the answer, seeking to stop the frenetic ongoing desire, but to kind of lock it down, to get the product that will make us happy, to get the retirement where we can no longer have to work, the political society that will there is an ongoing dialectic that never ends. Okay, so I want to use an example of what I mean. It's a story that I used to tell at the start, when I started public speaking. I've actually been going back recently and telling the old parables that I used to tell, but hopefully with a deeper sense of their meaning, bringing out something new from them. That's what's interesting about parables. They're very different from if you're a speaker and you're always looking for different ways to make the same point. A parable is different. A parable is you always go back to the same thing, but you get something different from it. So it's more like a piece of art. A great piece of art you go back to again and again, and it stays the same, but you get deeper and deeper meaning out of it. So in this little parable, and many of you will know it, a student, a very arrogant student, goes to this old rabbi in this town and knocks on his door. It's like dinner time, the rabbi's eating. The student says to him, listen, sorry to interrupt, but I want to know the wisdom of the Jewish people. I'm a philosopher by training, and I feel I've got this religious impetus within me, and I want you to teach me that wisdom. The rabbi looks at him and says, listen, you're too young. Come back in 10 years. But the guy persists. And he says, okay, I'll ask you a question. He says, two guys come down a chimney. At the bottom, one has soot in their face, one doesn't. Who washes their face? Well, the guy says, the person with the soot on their face. The rabbi stops him and says, no, the person without the soot on his face. Why? Well, because when they get to the bottom, the person with the soot on his face sees the other guy doesn't have any soot, so therefore thinks he doesn't have any. But the guy without the soot on his face looks at the guy with the soot on his face, thinks, I must have soot on my face, therefore he washes his face. Guy goes, oh yeah, of course. Just try me again, ask me another question. The rabbi says, okay, a different question. Two guys come down a chimney, and at the bottom one has soot in their face and one doesn't. Tell me, who washes their face? Well, this time the guy says, well, you've already told me, it's the person without the soot on their face. The rabbi stops him and says, don't be stupid, it's the one with the soot on his face. You think you can't have soot on your face, you won't feel it in your eyes, you won't taste it on your lips, you won't see it on your hands. The guy with the soot on his face washes. Don't try to be clever. Go away. The young guy says, okay, one more time. The rabbi says, okay, a different question. Two guys come down a chimney. One has soot in their face, one doesn't. Who washes their face? The young guy thinks for a second. He said, well, was it my first answer for different reasons? And the rabbi says, no, they both wash their face. How can you not come down a chimney and not think you've got soot on your face? Now go away, leave me to my dinner, come back to me in 10 years. Right. So that's a little story. It's an old Jewish story. I don't know the origin. But I think it captures really beautifully the Hysteric's discourse. So, how come? Think of the rabbi as the Hysteric. Why? Because you're not getting an answer from it. It's a different answer every time, right? The Hysteric is the one who doesn't know what they think, and they question, they change their minds, they're not sure. So the rabbi is taking the position not of the answer, but of changing the question. So there's a kind of hysterical dimension. You can't get the answer from the rabbi. S1 is the student. The student is there kind of to learn, but not really, right? Students, generally, Heidegger said this, is you think students are there to learn and teachers are there to teach. No, students come in knowing everything pretty much, and lecturers don't. And the lecturer has to very gradually teach the student that they don't know, right? So there's kind of unlearning to any kind of discipline. And this is the same in analysis. The analyst is confronted by an analysand who knows what they need, right? I'm an alcoholic, I need to stop drinking. They know exactly what they want and exactly what they need. They probably even know how to do it to some extent. They just need a little bit of extra help. And the analyst is there to go, to not talk about the alcohol at all, really, to just talk, to discover whether the alcohol is actually not the problem, but the solution to a problem. And suddenly you're not talking about the alcohol at all. You're starting to go, well, what is the problem? What is the issue? Why am I doing that? And all of these questions begin to come up. So the analysand starts with a very concrete thing. This is what I want and this is what I need. And in various forms of therapy, that's taken for granted, right? There's various forms of therapy, I won't name them, where the person is a kind of client and they come in with a problem and your job is to help them with that problem, right? Rather than the idea that maybe they don't know what they want or need themselves. And part of this process is to open up that questioning. Okay, so the student is S1, they have the answer. When they confront the rabbi, what is potentially produced is interpretation, is knowledge, is starting to think, is starting to crack open the certainty that, I'm an alcoholic, that's the problem, I need to get that fixed. That starts to kind of crack open and you go, well, maybe maybe the drinking is what I do because, of that separation anxiety I had with my mother, and the alcohol is like the mother's milk. It kind of brings me to a type of oceanic kind of feeling of being at the mother's breast. So when I drink, I get that almost like when you see babies. I've been told they can kind of look a little bit drunk after they've been at the mother's breast, right? And so maybe the alcoholic that's the experience they're having because there was some sort of separation. So the questioning starts to happen, the interpretation starts to occur, right? And then lastly, what is the rabbi standing on? Well, potentially the ultimate mystery. That what the rabbi understands is you're not being invited into an answer if you want to be part of this tradition. You're being invited into a conversation that has been going on for thousands of years, that will continue to go on for thousands of years more. And the inspiration for that ongoing, impossible, contradictory conversation is an unspeakable truth, an unsymbolizable real that we can symbolize as God. Right? That is the Hysterics discourse. Why do I think this is a reformation? Because I think that the churches are generally a master's discourse or a university discourse. And I don't think that we have a expression of the church that is the Hysterics discourse. I don't think that exists yet. But I think it's in continuity. Remember I said at the beginning that a reformation is a break, but it's a break that retroactively seems to make sense of things that were invisible before. It like shines a different way, a different light, so you see different things. So the Hysterics discourse, I would argue, is a way of having a break with the tradition that actually helps us see something deep within the tradition. This is also post-theistic. Church of the Contradiction is not about intellectual atheism or intellectual theism. It's about experiencing a fundamental division in the other that cracks us open to help us encounter a fundamental mystery. And that fundamental mystery cannot be adequately described in terms of classical theism or classical atheism. Okay, is there anything else I would like to say? Oh yeah, an example. Okay, so I promised to give you an example. This is from Wake, and I wish I maybe got some photos of this that I could maybe put up on Patreon, but at Wake is an attempt to create a type of feeling of Church of the Contradiction. And we were in this barge, and in the bottom room of the barge, this incredible dear friend of mine, an incredible artist, street artist called Ed Hicks, had these pieces done in the barge. And the main piece was at the front, behind the speakers, and it was a massive void, right? This black void on this kind of white canvas that was hung up. Now, I didn't know he was going to do this, so when I'm talking about this, it'll sound like I crafted all of this. The best Church of the Contradiction liturgies all came about because of an amalgamation of different people not coordinating that much together, and somehow it created something better than if we had tried to conceptualize it. So what was happening in the barge, right at the back, this massive 8 foot by 8 foot black void. Then in front is where the music was happening, the conversations, interviews and talks. And then there were the seats where people could sit and tables and listen, right? So if you think of what was happening on the stage, most of what was happening on the stage through people like Duke Special, a great musician, who was singing about doubt and unknowing and contradiction, or my conversation with Julie Reish, where we explored, again, this radical sense of unknowing. Or the talks that I was giving, or whatever. Maggie Rowe did a brilliant spoken word piece that embraced her kind of attempts at having certainty that collapsed so much into an affirmation of doubt and unknowing and this kind of embrace of the world in all of its contingency and mystery, right? So that was happening on the stage. Think about that as the bardess. That's what's happening on stage. Behind the stage, almost like not even something that your eye is looking at, because your eye is on the stage, not what's behind it. But behind it, what kind of like sustains that discourse and is sustained by that discourse is the void, is object A, is this absolutely unspeakable real. Then you have the people who are there in attendance, and they're being invited to experience their own unknowing through what's going on stage. So for example, when Duke Special sings about, he's got a beautiful song called Condition that you can look up, it's on my YouTube channel, that kind of expresses the profound contradictions that we are. Through that, the people who are listening to that music are invited to experience that contradiction in themselves, to kind of crack open any kind of the illusions that we have it all together. And then the point and what happens after, in the evening, after the events of Wake, people go out for drinks, go to the local bar, conversations, interpretations. There is enough going on the stage to hopefully generate an experience, but not enough that's telling you what to think or giving you life advice or wisdom. In fact, the idea almost is the attempt, which I sometimes feel at, but the attempt to say stuff without saying too much, so that something can be generated by everybody, me included, when we're together in the pub as equals, chatting around what this means, doing interpretation and enjoying that interpretation, enjoying the conversation and the not knowing and the idea that we can have possibilities and experimentations. So very basically then, the Hysteric's discourse is a divided subject. The liturgy is the divided subject, so the liturgy has doubt, unknowing. That's why it has parables, because they open multiple interpretations. It expresses Christ crucified. To people who, knowing or not knowing, often think we have the answers. So it cracks us open, creating and producing an enjoyment of knowledge and possibilities that we generate ourselves, that isn't given to us by another. And this is sustained by ontological mystery. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to look to see if anybody has any questions. I hope that made some sense, because that for me is me trying to articulate this entire vision, what I've been doing for 30 years, in 45 minutes. All right, let's have a look. Lots of conversations. It's going to be hard to find the questions. I hope you did the cues. Oh, yes, lots of chats. And there's Rogers. I think he gave me another 99 cents. You might be the first and the last people to ever give me money on YouTube. If you give me a couple more dollars, I can buy a coffee tomorrow, so the coffee's on you. No, don't do that. I'll put the rest in for the coffee. Let's see. I'm scrolling. No, it's all just conversation, so I'm going to give you a couple of seconds if anybody wants to ask a question. Maybe I'll juggle or something like that. And then if not, I will let you go. But what's exciting to me is there feels like there's vibrancy around this again. Honestly, COVID, there was a real interest and there was a real vibrancy. I think after COVID, when we all got tired of digital online stuff, things kind of died down a bit. But for whatever reason, it feels like there is a lot of energy with a lot of you about these ideas. That's very exciting, and I really appreciate you being a co-creator with me on these things. So here we go. Question. Ethan said question and then nothing. I'm going to take that as a symbol of something. Nicole. Hey, Nicole. How do you know which symptoms you should just learn to enjoy your enjoyment? And which symptoms you might need to change. Drug abuse is a symptom. You shouldn't learn to enjoy that. Brilliant. Part two of the question, perhaps focusing on your health a bit too much as a symptom that you can just learn to enjoy. Brilliant. So Nicole's referencing more so actually what I was talking about yesterday, but it connects with this as well, which I was basically making an argument for. There's an idea in analysis to enjoy your symptom. And I'll explain that in a second. And what I was saying is, if you're in a relationship, we're all in relationships with different people in different ways. Can we enjoy the other person's symptom? So it's about enjoying your symptom and enjoying the other person's symptom rather than it just annoying you, right? Because it's the person's symptom that is really the most uniquely them. I wonder if I can give a reason for that. Because that's a big idea. Like, our symptoms are what makes us who we are, right? It's not all your identities, but your symptom. And basically what that means is your symptom is what erupts in response to the unique way that you responded to the mystery of the other's desire when you were an infant. As you're confronted with the mystery of being in this world and being in this family and figuring it all out, your symptoms reflect something of your unique way of navigating that mystery. So what I'm going to do is try and peel back, because Nicole's question is very good. The first thing to say is we're always enjoying our symptom from a psychoanalytic perspective. So the first thing is, when someone like Lacan says, enjoy your symptom, there's a sense in which it works from the background that we're already getting something out of our symptom, whatever it is, even if it's destroying us, there's something that we're getting out of it. And one of the things in psychoanalysis is, what I talked about with the analyst discourse is the only promise, sounds like in the Matrix, what was the guy called who gave the pills? He basically says, the only thing I promise you is that you will see reality. I can't remember what the quote is. Sorry, I butchered it. But it's like, the only promise in analysis, which makes it different from therapy, is not that you'll get better, but that if you do the process, you'll encounter your own unknown enjoyments, your own repressed enjoyments. You'll encounter those dimensions that you hide from yourself. So that's what analysis does. It helps you see what you're getting out of your symptoms. And then, as Nicole says, the problem is our symptoms, while they might be the solution to a problem and they might be our unique way of understanding this mystery, they can become destructive. They generally do become destructive eventually. So the wager of analysis is that in coming to know your symptoms in a space of grace, where you're not judged. You're not judged. So for your symptom is you're kind of like borderline, what they call borderline, but you can't emotionally regulate, for example, right? That's your thing. So to be in a space where that is accepted, you're not judged for it. You go like, yeah, this is something that you experience. And you begin to understand why that's there, what you get out of that emotional kind of roller coaster. That process itself, the wager is that the negative dimensions of that will weaken. You'll begin to get in the driver's seat. And not that you'll overcome it, but that potentially, because you're more aware of the enjoyments, you'll drain it of its suffering, and you'll find ways to sublimate it, to kind of like find ways in which it can work for you, not against you. Not with the promise that, oh, it'll go away entirely, although sometimes symptoms do go away entirely, so that can happen. But it's the process of experiencing such grace and such non-judgment that you can articulate what is going on in the symptom in such a way that it begins to dissipate. And Nicole, so it's a brilliant question, because it's very difficult, and I can make this sound easier than it is, but like in therapy, the analyst is being, often an analysand is doing something that's destructive. Maybe it's destructive sexual behaviour, it might be sadomasochistic behaviour that's really destructive to them, or it might be they're sleeping around a lot and it could be destructive to their sexual health. It might be that they're emotionally not regulating and it's damaging to their relationships with other people, right? There's all sorts of things the person in analysis will be doing that is damaging themselves or other people. And the analyst, to a certain extent, because there's a limit when it comes to like suicidal ideation, that kind of thing, but to a certain extent has to not give the analysand what they want, which is a way out, but be able to contain that, to be able to contain whatever destructive symptom it is, and keep speaking it, keep speaking around it and through it, keep analysing it, keep basically letting the person speak and speak and think and speak, and feeding back to them what they're saying, with the wager that that will dissipate the power of that, the negative power of that symptom. I don't know if that was clear or useful at all, but Nicole, thank you, great question, because it gets to the heart of whether, in counselling, the person will, counsel, but in analysis, there's this idea that you've got to kind of resist that, with some exceptions, but be able to contain in a non-judgmental way whatever the other says. Let's see, we've got lots of therapists, but we had loads of psychotherapists and psychoanalytic psychotherapists at Wake, so I feel now very insecure around so many experts. Claire is on this. Claire is a great psychotherapist, so there's people better able to talk about those things than me. Claire actually just said, I asked a question earlier on, can't copy. All right, I can go back and have a look. Heidi's asking, can you tell your own story on decentering and surrendering religion? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if I can. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there was something happened, definitely. Well, my conversion was a decentering experience. And I think ever since then, when I was 17 and I felt this radical kind of rupture, I kind of felt that that was the key truth to that conversion experience. But I'll come back to that because I'll do that some other time. Maybe actually one of the morning reflections, I'll tell my story, Heidi, and I'll have a think about it and say something profound or just more interesting. Let's see, there's loads of questions. I'm not going to be able to do all these because you'll all be bored. You can go away anytime, but I'll try and do a few. Jeff says, I'm going to bring Julie Reich into this. Why do we, the congregation, have to enjoy this new knowledge, symptom, or contradiction? Okay, nice for channeling Julie for me, Jeff. The thing, and I don't know whether it's a difference between Julie and I or not, but the thing that I take out of analysis is we're always already enjoying. You can't not enjoy. And the best example of this is when you are prohibited from enjoyment as a child, you will turn the prohibition of enjoyment into the enjoyment of prohibition. There's a sense in which I say you can't get away from enjoyment. So it's not even a should or shouldn't. It's like enjoyment is always already happening. It's kind of what I was saying to Nicole's question. And it's becoming aware of that enjoyment and aware of how enjoyment is actually oriented around not having. Something that is in the videos that I'm putting up at the moment in Patreon, the Church of the Contradiction episodes. I can't remember which episode, but I say, I've got a clip of this on my Instagram. I'm talking with Helen, and I say that the commodity is disappointing, but it gives us something we really want. What we really want is dissatisfaction, and the commodity is brilliant at giving that, because our enjoyment is intimately connected, not with the commodity working, but precisely with the commodity not working. That dissatisfaction is where our enjoyment kind of like is hooked, but we just don't realize it. So I don't know if that makes sense. I would say that yes, it's not a we should enjoy, but enjoyment is always already happening, and but we misperceive where that enjoyment is. Okay, Courtney, multiple questions throughout the chat. Is there? Oh, right. I've missed lots of them. I apologize. You mentioned Luther, says Ethan, as part of your genealogy. Does Calvin interest you at all? Yes, but as a non-expert. There's some aspects of Calvin that I'm very interested in, but I feel like someday I should do a deep dive into Calvin, because Calvin was the tulip guy, wasn't it? Total depravity. I really like that, because total depravity for Calvin, is, from what I can understand, doesn't mean we're all depraved totally. It means that depravity is in every aspect of our being. It's that every part of us lack is is echoing throughout. So there's certain elements of Calvin that I could kind of reappropriate some of the language, but maybe you want to do that if you know Calvin better. I think there'd be lots of fruitful stuff there. Oh, there's so much here. I feel overwhelmed now. Can you give us the death of God genealogy again, please? I need to write it down. I've given it so many times. Are you joking? Are you being sarcastic? Because I'm always saying it. But Apostle Paul, Luther, Hegel, Nietzsche, Freud, Lacan, and then us, number 6. Okay, I'm going to look for one more. I want to look for your question, Claire, if I can find it. So let's have a look. Oh, there's Mindy as well. Hey, Mindy. Okay, Claire, you better not be lying to me here, because I'm looking through. Okay, I cannot see it. I apologize. Oh, there it is. I find it. I'm going to bring. Oh, yeah. You're also bringing Julie Reich into the conversation. That's good. Yeah, she's always sitting on my shoulder a little bit, making sure that I don't get too positive. So I'm going to bring Julie Reich into this. Why do we, the congregation, have to enjoy this new knowledge? Oh no, that was you. Sorry, I answered that. Oh yeah. Okay, I thought that was somebody else. Oh no, maybe that was a different question. Why do we, the congregation, have to enjoy this new knowledge? And, oh yes, no, I did respond to that, which is kind of like, I think we already are enjoying our symptom. I'm so interested in the idea that the symptom is where we hit the truth. And what I mean by that is the symptom is the response to hitting the unspeakable real. So for me, the reason why I'm not a relativist is because I believe we hit the truth, and the evidence that we hit the truth is our symptom. And anxiety. Yeah, so sorry, I did get to your question, Claire. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you so much for being part of this, but more than that, thank you for being on this journey with me. I wish you were all here. We could all go out for a drink, just like when at Wake. But next week we have Coffee and Concepts, where we can talk about some of these ideas in a Zoom chat if you're on my Patreon. So all right, have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.